Hello, I'm Paul Briley, and you're listening to Off the Comma. On this podcast, we explore all facets of what it means to feel stuck in life. We talk with people just like us who have found themselves sitting on a comma and not knowing where to go next. We'll unpack the experience, where they felt stuck, what they experienced, and what they learned. My goal is to inspire you by seeing yourself in others and finding possibility for yourself. Let's get into this week's conversation. And we are back with another exciting episode of Off the Comma, this time face-to-face on video, and I'm excited about that. And just another great opportunity for us to be able to hear from someone, to share their story, add their story to our community and themselves to our community of storytellers. And again, we just continue to show the importance of listening and being able to normalize our experiences and really see what we can learn from everyday people like ourselves without having to be told how to live by experts. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's just not what we do here on Off the Comma. I'm excited to be back again this week with someone new, Yumi Wilson, and I'm going to let her introduce herself here in just a moment. We really don't know each other well. We've interacted a couple of times in some professional settings, and we have shared the same training experience through our coach training, professional coach training. So I'm actually looking forward to learning a little bit more about Yumi today through the telling of her story. And with that said, I'm going to stop rambling and I'm going to turn it over to you, Yumi. So introduce yourself. Start by telling us, like, how would you like to be known? And then you can add in anything else that you would like for us to know about you.
Yeah, that's a great question. How would I like to be known? Well, it's kind of changing for me. And I don't know if it's about transitions and midlife transitions and all of that, but I know that as a professor for many, many years at San Francisco State, I've identified myself always as a journalism professor who teaches, broadcast and,
Mm.
but when I think about how I would like others to think of me, I see myself quite differently. I see myself as a deep listener, someone who people can confide in and
Mm.
feel like they are in a safe space. Having meaningful conversations has become incredibly important to me. In terms of other ways, I think knowing that I can be of service, I often help people with their LinkedIn profiles because some part of my background is I used to work at LinkedIn and learned everything I could about a social media platform, and it's really helped me in every other part of my life. So giving credit to that, just kind of wake up call, like here's how technology has impacted everything that you knew as the news media and journalism
Mm.
was a really big step. I feel like we're going through that again with AI, which is
Mm.
why I have a podcast that's been recently rebranded to A Journalist Guide to AI.
Mm.
And when I think about that podcast and the purpose of it is as journalists and communicators, how do we navigate in a space where AI is doing a lot more than we expected, and based on predictions will do even more. And then I also think of myself as a grandma and a mom and an auntie and someone who's really trying to bring the family back together. And, after my sister, who was only 3 years older than me, recently died back in December.
Mm.
So that's had a huge impact on who I am and who I am going forward.
Mm. Well, first of all, I just want to acknowledge that loss, and I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of your sister. And it sounds like, from what you're sharing, it's not just, I shouldn't even use the word just, but it's not just the loss of a family member, but there's been a lot of impact as a result of that, it seems. So,
Yeah.
my condolences, certainly.
Thank you. Yeah.
And I want to reflect, in what you shared. I hear this theme of listening that you talk about, and listening to others, but also sort of, and you correct me where I'm wrong or if I misstate anything, but listening to your environment, listening to trends, patterns, kind of the world around and so forth, it seems. And you talk about journalism, you talk about being a professor, you talk about technology. It just seems like you're very dialed into things that have to do with communication as well as the listening that you've been describing.
Definitely. I mean, I feel like when I started the podcast back in 2023, I really wanted to be in a space where I am learning about technology and how it's impacting journalism and the media again. And I still am very curious and still wanting to be on top of that. But I will say that I'm much more curious, like I'm much more interested in learning how AI impacts our lives as human beings, not just as journalists.
Hmm.
So I think that's part of of who am I kind of
Hmm.
question that I'm running into a lot.
Yeah. Well, Yumi, I'm looking forward to hearing how some of what you've teed up for us, shows up and presents itself in the story that you're going to share with us here in a little bit. So I'm definitely looking forward to see how that shapes. And we'll get to the 5 questions here in a couple of moments. We haven't talked in advance about what you're going to be sharing today, but one of the things I do with every single guest before we get into the 5 questions is it's an invitation to you as you think ahead to the next 40 minutes or so and the telling of your story today, what would be your intention for yourself today?
I think my intention immediately that comes to me is just trying to be as honest and authentic as I can be and not worried about how others will see me. Because I think I've
Mm,
spent a whole lifetime worrying about that external validation and worrying that, oh, I'm not, am I off brand by not talking about journalism or communications? But I
mm.
think my intention here would be just to be as close to my truth as I can be.
I love that. And in order to support your intention, my intention is to hold that space for your story today. Obviously, kind of jump in with reflections and questions along the way, but that in bringing your story out there to the world, there will be people out there who will see a little bit of themselves in you and your experiences. And that'll help them feel a little bit more connected, maybe a little less alone. And in the best of cases, feel inspired or even empowered to go out and do something that they've been wanting to do.
Wonderful.
Let's jump in. The first question, Yumi, is where in your life have you found yourself sitting on a comma?
I love that term, the comma. And when I first heard it, I think we were in one of our, you were at the workshop at McLaren. Um, at first I was like, whoa, that's so, because I mean, I look at it from a grammatical, issue like comma,
Hmm.
and it can sometimes be maddening because, sometimes people have too many commas and sometimes people don't use commas in the right way. And here we are talking about where is the comma in my life?
Hmm.
And gosh, I have so many. I guess my mom, I had tried to take care of her when I was in my early 20s. I moved her down to Los Angeles where I had just gotten a job at the Associated Press in Los Angeles. And I was so convinced that I could heal her. She was very sick. She ended up dying a year later, and it really
Hmm.
stopped me in my tracks. I think it was really the first time I started to question everything I knew and thought I knew as a 20 something. And but I still gave it my all. I was working at the Associated Press in Los Angeles at that time, covering big issues like the Rodney King beating and the aftermath, and being in Simi Valley the day that
Hmm.
the 4 officers were acquitted, and then slowly watching the disintegration of life as we know it, with fires
Hmm.
burning and stores being taken over and merchants on their roofs with guns. So I think that was another pause because I remember being groomed to become a sports reporter for the AP and sitting at a Dodgers game and wondering to myself, is this what life is about? Am I going to
Hmm.
become a sports reporter, free food forever, best seats in the house? And it was when I decided to look for other opportunities. And I ended up getting a great opportunity in San Francisco at the Chronicle
Hmm.
and, reporting and traveling and doing all those things. And I think really the next comma was having my child when I was just before 30 and thinking, gosh, if I continue doing my life as a reporter, which is, nonstop weekends, then I really won't be able to take him to soccer matches or, things that you can do when you have a more flexible schedule. And that's what led me into applying for a tenure track position at SF State,
Hmm.
where I've been for 20 years now.
It's a journey, right? It as you talk and as I'm kind of self-referencing because I'm thinking back to my own experience with my own career, but you were in this field of journalism and thinking to be a reporter, and then kind of life's happening. How does that fit with my life and the way my life is unfolding? I'm also hearing that how does it fit with my belief systems, my interests, and so forth. I know your story is going to continue. I'm curious, what drew you to the reporting end of journalism in the first place?
I think I've always been that kid. I'm the third child. I was a third child of, the youngest. And I was always curious. I always wanted to know what is going on and why is it happening? And maybe because I wasn't getting a lot of answers at home, because my mom was very private about her past. My father was very private. And because they were in a marriage that most of their family members on both sides did not approve of, my dad being Black, my mom being Japanese, and this was the 1960s.
Mm.
Um, we didn't really have grandparents or relatives that I remember being, involved as we grew up, which just meant that I didn't have a lot of outside kind of, ways to connect. And it was really just about my family.
Which kind of brings it full circle too, right? In terms of as you're exploring and experiencing the journalism end or the reporting end of journalism, coming back to your family ultimately brings you to the pivot and the move. Is that fair to
Yeah,
say?
I love that. I think that is absolutely true. My family has been significant in so many ways because we just had each other. I refer to this in the writing that I do, which is we were like the unit, Wilson Five,
Mm.
kind of like the Jackson Five, but the Wilson Five, because it was
Hmm.
three kids, mom and dad, and we moved every 3 years, going from like Japan to Fort Campbell, then Fort Belvoir, and then Hawaii, and then California, and we stuck together through all of that. And now, when my sister was sick, I remember being at the hospital with her almost every day and feeling bad when I wasn't there. But the other thing I think silver lining wise happened, which is we hadn't been in touch with our nieces and nephew who now live in Texas.
Mm.
And they had moved away years and years ago. And because of what happened, I'm actually traveling to San Antonio this weekend, or on a weekend. I'm starting to reconnect with family
Hmm.
and um, seeing that family, or whatever I define as family, um, is not only important in my life, but it really helps to determine what I want to do more of in my life.
Mm. So say more if I'd love to dig kind of go a little deeper into the story, right, of the comma that you were sitting on. This family theme is just resonating so strongly and it's showing up in so many different aspects and elements. And maybe I'm maybe I'm trying to force a story on the comma here or not, and we don't have to do that, but I'm just curious as you talk about this evolution and your move from LA to San Francisco, your transition from the reporting into journalism into teaching. Say more about what that move was like and what that transition meant. Because I'm assuming, based on what you said during your introduction, is that you went into teaching journalism versus practicing journalism. Is
Yeah,
that accurate?
it was huge. Yeah. I mean, to make that decision, I knew what I was kind of giving up. I mean, the reason I had become a journalist, one of the reasons is it was exciting. I mean, going, each day you go to work and then you're like out, at a wildfire, or the next day you're at a baseball game. The next day you are, covering a city council meeting. It was so exciting. And I knew that that's what I valued in terms of working. But what I thought was interesting is when my son came along, I wanted more time with him. I
Hmm.
felt like I'm working all day. I don't get to see him until the end of the day. My brother's ex-wife was taking care of my son. And I was thinking to myself, how do I align? How do I work? Because I got to get paid. How do I work so that I can also be with my family?
Hmm.
And I find myself asking the same question now.
Mm. How did the move to San Francisco and moving into teaching support that intention and that outcome?
Well, definitely moving into teaching was like um, a breakthrough because I no longer had to be somewhere all day long and possibly weekends. A schedule as a professor is much more flexible, and depending on the year and circumstances, can really allow you to do other things. And
Mhm.
the goal, of course, is to create works and novels and memoirs and articles. And so you're doing other things usually with that time.
Mhm.
Um, but I think what teaching allowed me to do, well, here's the other thing I want to mention. I never thought I was going to become a professor. So if someone said to me, "Do you want to become a professor?" No, I really love working. I love teaching. I love working and love reporting. And I'm not trained I don't have a PhD. I always joke with my
Mm.
students. I say, call me professor, but don't call me doctor because I'm not a PhD. And they laugh because most of their professors are PhDs because that is
Mm.
truly usually the route. My route was my experience. And that experience was enough to get me this tenure track position. And since 2019, I'm fully tenured, and which is a lovely feeling to have. But it really was about having flexibility and also really pursuing the kinds of stories and ideas that I wanted to pursue that I felt like with daily journalism, I wasn't able to do.
Mhm. So I hear definitely the time element, the scheduling element, or even just like it could be the same. I'm generalizing, right? It could be
Yeah,
the
yeah.
same 8 hours, but if those 8 hours fall during the evening times when your family's actually home and accessible, right?
Right.
I want to bring it back to because I didn't mean to gloss over it earlier. You said, and now I'm kind of at that place again right now.
Yeah.
Say more about that.
Yeah, so now I feel like with my son and his family, two grandkids up in Humboldt County, my dream, I think of, I recently spent 3 weeks up in Humboldt County, surrounded by beautiful redwood trees and the sound of the ocean, and then really being able to see one grandkid or both grandkids and my kids at certain times, but not all the time. I was thinking like, wouldn't it be amazing if I could figure out a way to spend more time up here
Mm.
in Humboldt? And how can I make that happen? So yeah, I mean, I just see myself. I mean, I enjoy what I'm doing. I enjoy teaching. And what I wanted to say earlier was that I was brought in as a guest speaker while I was working at the Chronicle in someone's
Mm.
class. And it was through that experience, he invited me, like, would you like to be a lecturer? But it was also the connection. Like, I didn't expect to be enjoying myself so much and having this connection of telling other people, well, here's how you do it, and here's how you can do it and get excited about it. But I also saw that as my superpower. It was something
Mm.
that it felt right. I've got colleagues who I brought in to give guest lectures, or they've taught for a semester, and then after that they're like, never again.
Mm.
That's not their thing. And so I realized it was my thing. I really enjoyed it.
You know what really jumps out to me, and it's funny because we're both coaches, right? And so on the one hand, I'm like, oh, how do I make that a question? We're not in a coaching session, so I don't have to make it a question. I want to reflect it back. It seems like your experience is part of what that superpower was, right? Because as a reporter, as a journalist, you have to take in all the information and then figure out a way how to sort, sift, synthesize, and then repackage to present. And that is a skill set. That's a talent. That's an art form, right? And it
Right.
seems like I'm making an assumption here that that really suits itself well to teaching because isn't that ultimately what one is doing, right?
You would think so. But I think what I realized is it's almost like you're doing your job as a reporter so well, which is you go out, you interview people, you get the best quotes, you try to put things together, you synthesize, as you mentioned. But I think teaching is extremely different. And I
Mm.
say that because you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you cannot communicate that knowledge so that a large group of people can understand it,
Hmm.
it's useless.
Well, and to my defense, not that it needs defending, I think that's really what I was trying to convey, right?
Yeah.
Is that you had experience with and developed and honed and fine-tuned this ability to communicate information and a message.
Yes. So
Yeah.
really, yeah. And so it's really that teaching, I think, and every year, people think it gets easier, but with technology, the impacts on, the changes, it's like, I feel like I'm relearning how to teach journalism and media every year. Like everything I said last year may not apply.
Mm,
And I do think that there is a real bridge or a real bridge toward coaching and the kind of coaching
mhm,
that I'm very motivated by. It feels like I get one-on-one time. So ideally, if I could take all students and have one-on-one time, it would be like, okay, this is how you do it. Oh, this is what you're doing well. Let's talk about what, and what's really stopping you. But with coaching, I get that really meaningful one-on-one time
mm,
to, you know, listen to them, tell me this, this is what I'm trying to get done.
mhm,
And we then figure out, okay, you know, take those, and they go through the kind of exploration, and it just feels so empowering. Today I had a call before this one, and my client was like working through it, but it was her coming to a point where she's like, this is what I'm going to do.
mhm.
And I asked, how does that feel for you? And she's like, I'm clear on it. I'm feeling good about it. And that gives me so much joy.
Yeah. Well, it seems there's an evolution there, right? To go from doing to teaching and then to facilitating the learning, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yumi, I'm seeing, and you tell me, where I'm off on any of this, but I'm seeing kind of two themes in terms of, I know you said I experienced a lot of commas, right? And most of us have, right? We're not just talking about one comma in a sentence, we're talking about commas throughout paragraphs and stories, right? But I'm sensing two themes here. One is your relationship with work and how and in what ways the work fulfills you, and how that work relates to your family experience. And I'm seeing not just the journey in terms of what you've done, in terms of how you've worked, but also where you've worked, and constantly coming back to, if not consistently, but at least periodically coming back to, and now how do I blend this in a way that I can spend more time with my family? And comically, it seems like you just keep going further north
Yeah.
at each of
I
those
love
points.
that.
I don't know if
Yeah.
there's any relevance there or not, but I was thinking that as you were talking about Humboldt County, I'm like, and she's going north again. So,
Yeah. It's interesting you say the word north, because when I think of my sister, I've been writing some stories about her, and I think of her as my North Star.
mm,
And so when I think of going north, as you mentioned, yeah, I mean, it's like, where is my true calling? Where is the thing that really brings joy? And then I can bring joy to them as well, because that's so important to me as well. And yeah, that's why my heart and my mind are like moving toward Humboldt. And I just have to
mm.
kind of figure out how.
Well, and I'll ask one more question. We'll go, and then we'll go into the second of the five questions. I'm really curious in what ways, well, I can't do this without it sort of leading. I'm assuming since you've been in this place before where you transitioned from LA to San Francisco or to Northern California, right? Um, is this similar to what you might have experienced back then? Is this like that kind of pre-contemplation period where the idea plants and is starting to germinate? I'll
Y-
stop there and leave it in your
Yeah.
hands.
I have never thought about that, kind of connected the dots that way, but it totally resonates with me because when I was thinking about leaving Los Angeles, it wasn't, an overnight decision. My mom had died in 91. My mentor at USC was saying, hang tight, you're gonna get through this, and you've got a lot to learn at the Associated Press, which was so true.
Mhm,
But I also in my mind was thinking, what are opportunities? I want to be looking at opportunities. It wasn't like I was set on coming to San Francisco at
mhm,
all. It
mm,
was just basically opening my life up to what are the opportunities out there. So going to job fairs,
mhm,
keeping my resume up to date, meeting people, And then it was going to a job fair and meeting Dan Rosenheim, who was the managing editor at that time at the Chronicle, and then saying him, flying me up to San Francisco. And I remember when he first offered me the job, I go, can I think about it?
Mm-hmm.
And he was so surprised. And I get it now because, people love San Francisco.
Sure.
But what I realized was it's not even that I'm ready or saying I want to go to Humboldt tomorrow, because I really do enjoy what I'm doing at SF State. And plus, I need the money, right? That's my professional
Right.
job. And I'm, not close enough to retire at this moment. So it's
Well, and if I
almost,
if I may
yeah, go
interject
ahead.
for just a moment, because I think this is important, you were very clear. You didn't say, "Oh, I'm thinking about moving to Humboldt." You said, "I want more time
Yes,
with family."
yes,
So,
yeah. It's about that, knowing that when I'm in the vicinity and knowing that, Thunder, the youngest grandkid, he just turned 1, could
mm,
come over with the parents that day and I might have an hour or two. It's that's so exciting to me. It's
mhm.
not that I'm going, okay, I'm going to go and rescue everyone and, you know, change what I'm doing. It's really, how lovely would it be to have more time and just taking incremental small steps toward that.
Yeah. Well, and I hear you describing it in terms of like the experience for you having the more time, right? But more time to do things. And so I guess I'm kind of inferring here, but it's this getting to a point of readiness where I think I want more of something. I want something that feels like next, open to it, don't exactly have my finger on exactly what it's going to be, but now I'm cracking a door or a window open to see what
Exactly.
blows in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yumi, the second question, and you can kind of go back and forth and continue to expand on your story as much as you like, but it
Mhm.
is as you look back at the comma that you were sitting on, and I know you're kind of talking a little bit more broadly here, what did that create for you, or what is it creating for you?
Well, I mean, if I look at the comma that I'm currently sitting on is, it just creates endless possibilities. Like, how do I get to a point where I'm spending more time with my family, but also continue to not only make money, but to make enough money so that I can be of support to my family, because that's important to me too. I
Hmm.
know it's not important to everyone, and I know that other people have different thoughts on that, but I just see myself as in this role where if I can help, I want to help. And knowing that, how do I get there? So it's not just about retiring and taking it easy and, reducing my expenses. I don't see it that way. I see it as how can I have more time with my family, but then also make more money,
Hmm.
and make money, not just for myself, but to make sure that every nephew and niece have, they have education funds, which is something that I didn't grow up with. I was not even familiar with education funds, but my husband, both of his daughters had education funds. And I can see how that little bit of money that you start saving early can make such an impact.
Hmm.
It's really the notion of accumulated wealth, or the notion that generationally you get this buffer or this support, and how big of a difference it can make. For example, Megan, the oldest niece who I got to see for the first time in years at my sister's service, she wrote me a text that said, I want to thank you. I never got a chance to thank you for that savings bond you bought me. I used it to buy my first car.
Mm.
And it helped me to remember, like, all these little things we do for our children, our grandchildren, our nephews and nieces, and we don't think it's that big of a deal. It's a big deal.
Hmm.
And knowing that, I really want to make sure that I do it for others.
Mm. Definitely there's an impact that you seek, right? And
Hmm.
it's rich in its definition. It's the connection, it's the relationship, it's the help, it's the support, but also kind of like the lasting effect. This is a great example of that impact that I had whenever I gifted it. Now look what it's kind of fruited into, if you will.
Exactly. Yeah. And I didn't even remember. I mean,
Mm,
I don't even remember doing it. I remember kind of when she reminded me, but it's not something I said to myself. I wonder why another kid, no one has ever thanked me for the savings bonds. I couldn't remember doing it.
mm-hmm. So you're sitting on a kind of major decision point in your life. It's very much in contemplation mode. And I hear that there's a lot of thought put into what this could mean, what it could look like, what are some of the reasons, and kind of what the future could turn into in any number of directions, right?
Yeah.
Well, let me ask the third question. So, what have you learned about yourself? Or maybe in this context, it's what are you learning about yourself since you're kind of still sitting on the comma?
Yeah, I'm definitely sitting on that comma, and I'm learning that um I've been scared to make changes because I've been scared of losing things, of like losing identity, of so firmly entrenched in the identity of journalism and journalism professor. And now that I'm seeing that, I'm open to seeing myself as something else.
Mm,
I think I was so locked into identity.
hmm.
What if I'm not locked into that identity?
Can I ask you to say more about that? Because in all that you've shared with us, I don't know that we've really touched on this piece of it, this identity, because what you've described is making changes, you've described taking on different roles, some of the reasons for it, and then of course the family reasons. And I don't know that you've really kind of shared a lot about what this means in terms of identity and the prospect of potentially having to change it or
Yeah.
give something up.
Yeah, so like when I think of my identity, it's all around journalism, media, communications, and technology and everything. But then when I'm doing coaching, which is something I'm learning through the program that I'm enrolled in,
Hmm.
and taking on new clients and, obviously charging them just a small enough, it's just significant, but it's really me learning. What I'm learning is that I thought I was going to be focused on helping people with journalism, or do they need a LinkedIn profile, or are they career oriented? I was very niche oriented in my mind.
Mm.
And what I realize is with each person who I'm getting the opportunity to work with, it is not about their identity or career. It is about real life problems, real life issues, like work life balance, like getting the self-care, the fitness that you want, um, how to fire someone.
Mm.
And what I'm realizing, those are just a couple of the examples, but it's like it doesn't matter where they work or who they are. It's a lot of very common life struggles. So I really want to expand my clientele. When I think about coaching now, I think of it as I'm not here to tell you, okay, you need career services or you're a journalist. And it's really about how I might help someone who's going through some challenges and being a listener, a facilitator, as you mentioned. Um, but even more so on my own identity, what if I'm talking about people without thinking about what they do
Mm.
and what they need? Because I think I'm very, very like, okay, do you need that done? And then we'll get this done. And I think that's the way I started the journey. And I just feel like, all right, I'll just be, like, for example, my podcast is about AI in journalism and the media. So every podcast is about, every episode is about how can these tools help you? Obviously, we look at ethical issues, but I find myself writing and wanting to talk about grief
Mm.
or talk about caregiving and how that might feel when you are also trying to juggle a full-time job,
Mhm.
or how relationships can sometimes stop the most successful people and throw you off that track that you were on. And using myself as an example, it's like when I was on this journey of, building up my podcast episode, I was doing an episode every week. I was, also taking on clients, and, it was like very hard driven, like I'm doing this and I'm getting all this done. And when my sister got sick, I wanted to be at the hospital with her. That meant that a lot of things that I thought I was going to be doing had to change because that's
Mhm.
what was important to me. So when I really think about like what is important to me is self-care,
Mhm.
is making sure that someone has the time to decompress, even thinking about the circumstances of her whole entire family, how I might approach it differently, knowing the skills I know now, knowing the things I know now.
Mm.
Um, I find myself wanting to talk about that a lot more than the latest update by ChatGPT.
Mm. So, and again, I'm just kind of exploring, and because there's so much in what you shared, and I'm kind of sort of seeking to understand as well, right? Like I hear this theme of identity and the possibility of changing identity. You talked about, you know, particularly from switching from journalism to coaching, right? And that role changing. You talked about, and I wrote it down, thinking about what people need versus something else, right? You gave the examples of being trained at and currently practicing talking about AI, but secretly, or maybe not so secretly, wanting to talk about grief and loss, right? I guess instead of going further, I'll ask a question. Since you describe part of what you're kind of sitting on the comma about right now is this possibility of changing identity, the question is, which identity are you most concerned about?
Well, I'm concerned about losing the identity I have, right? Because
Mm,
I've been known as an expert in these areas that have to do with journalism. I've been invited to conferences because, I can tell you about how to use these tools and get the most bang out of it, prompting. And I still think those things are very, very important. And obviously I still teach about it. But when I think of my next step of moving off the comma, of really looking
mm,
at the next whatever years I have, it is this larger, it is a different, it is talking about family and caregiving and um, everyday life, you know?
mm.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I am, I haven't made any final decisions. I feel like I'm just getting started, but
Yeah.
knowing and sensing that it's there.
Well, it seems like one of the things on your mind, and I used the
Hmm.
word concern. Maybe that's not even the right word, right? But one of the things that's on your mind is the possibility that you might go completely in a different direction and walk
Yeah,
away from this kind of background of professional expertise.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
What's that like for you to think about?
It's a little scary because, it's like you get paid for what you know.
Hmm.
And here I am sensing I want to move into this place where I know very little about. And while I have a lived experience of being, a caregiver and experiencing grief in a sense, it's nothing like having years and years of experience. So even saying it out loud is scary.
Mm.
But by not saying it and not acknowledging it, I think I'm disregarding a really huge part of myself that says there's got to be more.
I think one of my kind of selfish motivations in asking the question about which identity is something that comes up in a lot of these conversations, and certainly working with coaching clients and just talking to people in general, right? Especially when it comes to professional identity, is the first place my mind goes is, and yet, even if you were to no longer be, and I'm doing air quotes, well, that's right, we can see each other now. We're using the video. That I'm no longer the AI expert, or I'm no longer the professor who talks about AI topics and so forth. How much of that still informs and is intrinsic in the direction that you go? Is it really truly an identity shift? Because do you or do you not have lots of personal experience with grief and loss and with family, and how much of, all the way back to the beginning, the top of my page of notes, your identity as a deep listener, your identity as a kind of explorer with curiosity, journalist, how much of that actually does in fact inform and is informing where you want to go next?
I mean, the way you've said it, it's informing me a lot. And it also is bringing up this other idea that is it one or the other, or is it a combination of things? And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of where I'm starting to sense. I could go with it. It's not like I must, always talk about and be this, or I must change completely. What
Mm,
if I can talk about coaching and grief and helping, but I can also talk about how some AI tools can help you through that process.
mm,
Because that's the other thing that hasn't really been explored. Like, for example, I'm trying to learn ICF coaching principles and really adhere to that in my coaching. And I know that I have a test coming up and I've got to learn about it.
mm,
I've been able to use, ChatGPT. I pay for the 4.0 version, and to say, for example, I can ask if I were doing the meta model, and I want to use ICF guidelines. How might that look?
mhm.
And for a model to give me back responses, it's like I'm practicing in real time. It's like doing homework with someone if I don't always have other people to do homework with. And I learned this actually from another cohort member. She had mentioned she was doing that. And I'm like, wow, I am going to check that out. And what I realized is, I think a lot of people think of AI tools as, oh, it's going to help me write a headline. It's going to help me write the structure, blah, blah, blah. There's just so much more now that
Mhm.
it can do um, to help further your goals or my goals. And so maybe there is a way to have AI in the conversation, but not it to be the dominant part of the conversation.
It strikes me in all of this that you describe and kind of like the what's next and what really is this thing that I'm pausing to contemplate right now, right? It seems like it's the next assignment, it's the next story, it's the next thing to kind of get in and learn about and then figure out what, how, and if you're going to communicate it in another way. Let me ask question 4, Yumi. So, what has or is changing for you as a result of sitting on this comma?
Everything. I mean, I think everything is changing, and it's sometimes daunting,
Mm,
to think about what I'm considering. Like, I remember not wanting to talk about it out loud, you know.
mm,
And now I find myself talking about it every opportunity I get.
mm, mm,
I had my cohort coaching meeting today with my coach, and and talking about this very thing was really insightful, because it's like something on my mind, something I'm getting feedback from, something I'm considering, something, is it possible? Is it doable? What would it look like? How would I be,
mm,
because the one thing about the AI space, when I did start that program, no one had the title AI in journalism. Now everyone talks about AI in journalism, but it was
mm,
like really kind of cool to come up with an idea that was unique. And, when people talk about podcasts, they're like, you got to be unique. What's your unique aspect? There's a lot of self-care programs. There's a lot of shows on grief. There's a lot of shows on meta models and NLP techniques. So if I were to want to focus on coaching and the elements of helping people break through limiting beliefs, for example, what would be unique? And so I'm still
mm,
on that. Journey. Ultimately, if I am going to transition to a new career or a different career, it also has to at some point bring in money.
mm, mm. Which kind of brings in that other element that you've been speaking to, right? There's this time factor, there's this family factor, and then there's money. What else? It's kind of a weird question, or it might be kind of a weird question, but what else does money represent for you or mean for you in terms of kind of the long-term outcomes?
I think money represents safety. Money represents security
Hmm.
and self-sufficiency. And that's been really important to me all my life,
Hmm.
because, my family, my dad was in the army. We didn't have a lot. I remember getting government cheese, and there's a new show called Government Cheese, and it totally reminded me of how we got those big chunks of cheese back home
I
when we were
remember
li-.
those.
You do? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So I feel like when, for me, coming from knowing how it feels to have very little, I don't want to be in that place again. And I don't want family to be in that place. And so I want to do whatever I can. I've been given the opportunity to go to USC, the first person in the family to go to college, and then given the opportunity to get great jobs and have this education and to have this knowledge, I think of money as ways to make life better for others,
Mhm.
and that's very important to me.
I see how that fits into kind of this overall pattern or weave, if you will, of the fabric of your journey so far, right? With the uh, seeking something, accomplishing things, then what's next, or what's next in order to have or be or do. And so, like, in this journey that you've shared with us so far, just seeing what you've accomplished and seeing how your process unfolds and has unfolded in the past, to always bring you to kind of the next point. It seems like you're right there, as you have been in the past.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question, Yumi, is what does getting off the comma look like for you?
I'm happy as I'm seeing it, spending more time in the trees, at the beach,
Hmm.
running, frolicking with the kids, more meaningful connections with real people from different places, helping a lot of women. I see that coming off that comma, honoring my sister, staying connected to family.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Mm. And family, just that thread runs so brightly through the whole fabric, through the whole weave, right?
yeah.
Nice. Yumi, obviously, podcasts have an ending to them. There's so much more that we could explore and talk about, and certainly you and I can talk more off the mic. But for those of the listeners who might want to learn more about you, connect with you, talk to you more about some of the things that you're involved with, how can people find you? Of course, I'll be sure to put the links and the information in the show notes, but walk us through, where can people look you up?
Thank you for that. If you would like to connect with me, I am on LinkedIn and will accept your connection. Just remind me that you watched it on Off the Comma. I also have a website called yumiwilson.me, and you can see some of my posts and learn more about my coaching. Yeah,
And link to your podcast, I'm assuming, as well, right?
absolutely. Now that one is focused on a journalist guide to AI. So yeah,
Okay.
podcast will be another place.
Nice. Yumi, the last thing that we do on every episode, because obviously this podcast is all about lifting people's voices up, giving people an opportunity to be heard, and also for us to connect kind of just as community versus the who's an expert and who's a celebrity and who's a millionaire and all that. I don't feel like your story would be complete if we didn't give you an opportunity to do the same thing for others in your circle. So I call this section acknowledgments. And it's your chance to give a voice to, boost, lift up others, like organizations, causes, other creators, or just people in your circle, family, people who are important to you. Who
Yeah.
would you like to acknowledge? And I'll be sure to put their information in the show notes.
Absolutely. I mean, I want to thank Cami McLaren. She's the person who runs the McLaren coaching program. But before that, MK Chavez,
Hmm.
who I actually enrolled with her and she really that is how I started the idea of the podcast and really making it come to life, believing I could do it. Um, I also just want to thank a number of people along this journey of when my sister went through what she did. There were a number of people in the domestic violence community, Adrienne Lawrence among them, Kate McCarthy, who works at the Women's Media Center in DC. They really held my hand and helped me to understand a lot more about what domestic violence is and is not, and helping me to understand how because I just feel like I missed a lot of signs. But the other thing I want to acknowledge that I haven't really talked about before is I have had a chance to talk to Frank, her husband,
Hmm.
who's in jail awaiting his preliminary hearing. And I was really sure I would feel a certain way. But I have to say that getting the opportunity to talk to him has also changed my thinking on a lot of
Hmm.
things, and even the way that I thought about things. Because I always think I have things figured out. But by talking to someone I didn't think I would talk to or have the opportunity, I now can see how mental health issues and self-care and just needing support when you are going through so much, how we all need it. And I think that's also leading me to where I am re-examining everything that I thought I knew. A lot of assumptions that I made weren't really grounded.
Mm-hmm. Do you have an example, or is there something
So
in particular?
example,
Mhm.
so example, my sister had told me, her husband gambled. So in my mind, my journalist mind, I'm racing with ideas and thoughts and what happened. And I finally got a chance to ask Frank. And he mentioned that it was not that. He had, his mom had tried to, there was a whole thing with it. But his ability or his willingness to answer my questions and to be authentic, if
Mhm.
you will. I mean, he was also admitting, here's what I remember and here's what I know. Having the opportunity to talk to someone and realizing that some of the narratives that I had created in my head
Mm.
may not have been, may be off, may be really off. I'm really trying to think about that in the rest of my life too. Where am I
Mm.
making assumptions about, does she really like me? Oh, she was mean to me, or work is really hard because of them, or I'm really starting to do a lot more self-examination and a lot more stopping of, Yumi, you think this is really terrible, but why?
Mm.
What's that grounded on? What are your assumptions?
Mhm.
And that is all because I'm getting this very rare opportunity um, to have more answers, to
Mm.
better understand things.
It's interesting because in the context of these acknowledgments, and I know we didn't spend much time at all talking about the cause of your sister's passing or the circumstances and so forth. So thank you for shedding just a little bit of light into that. And we can see how important that is to you in your story, right? And what I was going to say is that in these acknowledgments, you're even talking about different sides of the coin, right? Like on the one hand, there's these women that you want to acknowledge who are on a certain side of the issue when it comes to domestic violence. And then also acknowledging the fact that, and I could talk to a person who was specifically on the other side of that coin, and being able to look at all the sides, and in a way that really doesn't surprise me based on what you shared with us, because isn't that the journalist in you?
That is a great way to thank you for that, because sometimes it doesn't make sense, like what I'm doing and what I'm going through and what I'm experiencing. But I guess in the lens of needing to know the truth from all sides, needing
Mm.
to know, yes, it does. Um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because on the one hand, you have a very specific point of view in this story because it was your sister, and yet that identity of exactly who you are as an explorer, as someone who's curious, as a journalist, needing to know the truth, that's still always there, right? And so
Yeah, I like
notice
that.
notice the influence that that continues to have. Like, who's to say you ever walk away from that,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So thank you for adding that to your story and sharing that with us. And I want to wish you a wonderful rest of your week. Obviously, you and I are going to stay connected, and we're going to talk a little bit more off the mic as well. But we just so appreciate you sharing this story and so many meaningful elements of this story with us today.
You are welcome. Thank you for allowing me to go on that journey.
So appreciated. Have a
Yeah,
wonderful weekend, and
thank you.
we will be following your story.
All right. Thanks, Paul.
Take care. What an honor it is for me to hear and share these powerful stories. I hope you feel the same way. Think about what you learned from this conversation. I encourage you to write it down in some form of journaling or reflection, because surprises can reveal themselves to you when you write your thoughts down. If you were moved by today's conversation, pass it along to someone you care about. And if you do discover something you'd like to unpack further, book a call with me and let's talk about it. My links are in the show notes. Be sure to like this episode and follow the podcast here on this platform and all social media at Off the Comma. Feel free to interact and comment. Thank you for listening to this episode of Off the Comma. As always, keep noticing and keep listening.